Tampoco, nunca pensé.
I never thought a family member would do something like that. We are distraught.
There are stories that stick with you long after the credits roll. Not because they're sensational, but because they are human. This is one of those stories. It begins on an ordinary August day and ends in a community's broken silence. It is the story of 19-year-old Dacara Thompson, a daughter, a recent high school graduate, a young woman who loved service and had a future that, cruelly, never came to pass.
On the morning of August 23rd, Dakara's life took a turn that her family, friends, and the small Maryland communities that knew her could not have imagined. She was reported missing that day, last seen leaving a location in Prince George's County. Surveillance footage would later show her approaching and entering a black SUV, footage that, at the time, would be the first clue leading detectives into a darker sequence of events. What followed was 2 weeks of frantic searching, unanswered phone calls, and a parent's worst fear. On August 24th, Dakara's vehicle was recovered abandoned in Hyattsville, a jarring symbol that something had gone terribly wrong. Authorities continued piecing together the images, the cell phone pings, and the small, stubborn leads that eventually led them to a home in Bowie, Maryland. Surveillance and cell phone data tracked her last movements to a residence there. A week later, on August 31st, Maryland State Police discovered a body in Arundel County, a grassy area off Route 50. The body was later identified as Dacara Thompson. The discovery transformed the case from a missing person search into a homicide investigation, and it left a community stunned. Investigators who combed the scene and later executed a search warrant found evidence that pointed toward a violent end. Indications of skull and facial fractures and blood evidence that connected the scene to a nearby residence. Shortly after the identification of the body, authorities arrested a 35-year-old man named Hugo Hernandez Mendez of Bowie. He was charged with first and second-degree murder and is currently being held without bond. Law enforcement officials say the evidence, surveillance footage, forensic traces, and items found during the search linked Hernandez Mendez to both the vehicle seen in the surveillance video and to the residence where investigators say Dacara was killed. So, to recap plainly, Dacara was reported missing on August 23rd. Her car was found the next day. Her body was discovered on August 31st off Route 50 in Arundel County. A suspect was arrested after investigators matched surveillance footage and forensic evidence to a Bowie residence. The charge: first and second-degree murder. These are the facts that shaped the investigation, and the facts that a grieving family now carries. But behind every case file, behind every headline, there was a person. Dacara Thompson was just 19. She had recently graduated from St. Charles High School. She worked for a local non-profit in Prince George's County, young life already leaning towards service and community. Friends and family described her as kind, ambitious, and artistic. She loved music and had a bright smile that lit up rooms. Those who knew her say she didn't deserve the brutal ending investigators uncovered. Her mother, and many others, wanted a single answer. Who took her, and why? Investigators don't work on gut feelings alone. They build a case stitch by stitch. A grainy frame from a camera that shows a woman walking up to a vehicle, a GPS ping that places a phone near a house, a swab of blood in a bedroom that doesn't belong, a fingernail possibly torn in a struggle. In this case, surveillance video proved crucial. It showed Dacara getting into a black SUV on the morning she vanished. Detectives then focused on that vehicle and the people who had access to it. When police executed a search warrant at the Bowie residence tied to the footage, they said they found troubling evidence: blood consistent with an assault, traces in a bedroom where investigators allege the killing occurred, and other items that tied the suspect to both the vehicle and the victim. Court documents later listed a collection of forensic links, biological markers, clothing items, and witness statements that suggested the death was not an accident. Authorities say that these findings, when combined, painted a damning picture that led to the murder charges. Public reporting also noted details about the suspect's prior encounters with law enforcement, a previous arrest for driving under the influence earlier in the year, and immigration authorities saying he was in the country without authorization. Those details injected a contentious political element into the story, as some community members and public officials argued about how earlier encounters with law enforcement and federal immigration agencies were handled. But for prosecutors, each prior contact was secondary to the central question: did this man kill Dacara? For the family, previous paperwork offered little comfort. In court, Hernandez Mendez was denied bond and remains in custody. Prosecutors say the weight of the evidence and the danger posed justified holding him without bail, while the case moves toward grand jury proceedings and a preliminary hearing. Defense attorneys, as is their right, have requested counsel and begun the legal maneuvers expected in any capitalized criminal matter. Motions, discovery, and careful questioning of the evidence's chain of custody. The justice system will take its measured steps, but for Dacara's loved ones, justice feels painfully slow. The community responded with shock and sorrow. Funeral services were held for Dacara, attended by family, friends, and neighbours who wanted to remember the young woman she was, beyond the grim facts reported in the press. In public statements, her mother spoke of a daughter full of promise and asked for justice. Local leaders and advocacy groups also weighed in, calling for thorough investigations and support for families of victims. The cameras captured a community gathering around grief. The quieter story was the private rawness of mourning behind closed doors. It is important to be precise. While autopsy reports and public filings described skull and facial fractures consistent with blunt force trauma, in some early reports the official cause of death was still being finalised as forensic labs completed testing. Investigators, though, publicly stated that they expected the cause of death to be ruled a homicide. That expectation is what guided the murder charges filed against the suspect. Picture, if you will, the quiet, laborious work of detectives, hours of watching grainy footage, slowing frames to catch a hand movement, following license plate traces, knocking on doors, and pressing families for memories that might feel insignificant at first. A text message, a missed call, a friend who remembers a detail. Forensic technicians sweep with gloved hands, bagging each item with care. Every trace becomes a possible thread in the tapestry that will either connect the suspect to the crime or unravel under cross-examination. The stakes are enormous, the margin for error is small. Imagine that stretch of Route 50 where Dacara's body was found. A shoulder of grass, the smell of summer heat, the silence of early morning broken by distant traffic. For the patrol officers and investigators who discovered the remains, the scene became a somber entry point into a story that had been visible in fragments, but now demanded answer and explanation. A discarded object, a smear of blood, a shoe half buried in weeds. These are the small things that, when collated, tell a larger and far more tragic story. Despite arrests and charges, there are still important open questions. Had Dacara and the suspect met before that day? Was this a random encounter or something arranged? What was the motive? Prosecutors said in early filings that detectives were still working to determine whether the two knew each other prior to August 23rd. These are critical details, because motive and familiarity shape not only the narrative, but how the case will be prosecuted and how the community will understand the tragedy. For Dacara's mother and those who loved her, the loss is immeasurable. In a courtroom and in public statements, her mother's words cut straight to the heart. She wants justice, and she wants the system to explain how a young life was taken so violently. The funeral, the press conferences, the interviews, all of it is a slow, public unfolding of private grief. Friends and co-workers remember small things. Dacara's laugh, the way she volunteered, the way she lit up at a song on her playlist. These are the memories the family holds on to now. Beyond the immediate tragedy, the case ignited broader conversations. Local reporting noted that the suspect had earlier encounters with law enforcement, including an arrest for driving while impaired earlier in the year. Immigration officials stated he was in the country without authorization, a fact that fueled political debate in the local press about federal and local cooperation on immigration enforcement. Those debates, while real and at times heated, must not distract from the primary objective of the case: securing justice for the victim and ensuring a fair legal process for the accused. Pause and imagine the ripple effects of a single violent choice. Friends, a mother's sleepless nights, a community's sense of safety shaken. Each consequence unfolds in real time. For those following the case, the next steps are critical. An upcoming preliminary hearing, the grand jury review, and the slow move toward trial, where evidence will be tested under oath and weighed by jurors. The legal system will do its work piece by piece, while memory and mourning continue for those left behind. Here's what to expect next in technical terms. Prosecutors will present their case to a grand jury or proceed with charges through the courts. Preliminary hearings and pre-trial motions will test the admissibility of evidence. Discovery will proceed as defense counsel examines the prosecution's files, and eventually, if a plea isn't reached, the case will go to trial. In the meantime, families wait and communities watch, hoping for answers, accountability, and above all, justice. We should not let the legal procession obscure the human life lost. Dacara loved music. She worked for a non-profit and had plans in front of her. Those who stood in the funeral line spoke of a girl with energy and a smile that made ordinary days brighter. When the camera's lens finally turns away from the courthouse steps, those personal memories remain. They are what we owe to Dacara, to remember her as more than a headline. Cases like these reverberate because they raise questions about safety, about how we watch out for one another, and how sometimes, despite best efforts, tragedy finds its way into neighbourhoods that thought themselves secure. They remind us why community programs, outreach and vigilance matter, and why the trauma of loss demands both legal closure and long-term support for those affected. And so we come to the end of this telling, but not to an end of the story. Dakara's case will continue through the courts. The suspect will have every legal right to a defence. The prosecution will build its case. What we can do, as witnesses to this sad chapter, is hold both the facts and the memory of a life with equal weight, seek truth through evidence, and remember the person at the centre of it all. Dacara, if anyone watching this knew you or heard your songs or felt your smile, this is for you. You were young. You were loved. Your life mattered. Today we say your name aloud so the world does not forget. We honour your light by bearing witness, by demanding answers, and by promising that your story, your laughter and your dreams will not be erased by the violence that took you. If you found this video meaningful, please help Dakara's memory travel further, like this video, leave a comment with what you think needs to happen next, and share it so more people know her story. If you have any information about the case that hasn't been shared with police, do the right thing. Contact Prince George's County Police or the detective handling the case. Your tip could make a difference. Rest in peace, Dacara Thompson. You're not forgotten. We will remember your name. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and share. And as always, stay safe and look out for one another.